Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Get comfortable and settle in. We'll start momentarily. Grab yourself some tea and get snuggled in. Welcome, everyone. I hope you're comfortable. We'll start in just a few minutes. Glad to see everybody today. Well, we have a wonderful webinar ahead of us. So it's 6:04. We're going to go ahead and get started. I want to start us off in a good way. Welcome to the Blue Jay Wisdom Webinar Series. Buju Nindawe Maganadag, Bridget Ray, Nindijinikas, Mikana Anishinaabe Inda Nij Manaduag, Makana Michif Ninjunjuba, and Stachas Ninda. I live in Stachas and Chimiquetch. So hello, my relatives. I'm glad to see you all. My name is Bridget Ray. I'm an Ojibwe woman and Two-Spirit. My family are citizens of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians over in North Dakota. And I'm a mixed Ojibwe, Michif in my grandfather's language, and I live in the traditional lands of the Squaxin Island people known as Stachas. Stachas means where the black bears gather, at least that's what my Squaxin friends tell me. A great place of abundance and teachings, and I'm grateful for this time together today. Thank you for being here and making this space a happy place with us. So we have such a treat today. And before I get started introducing our panelists, I would like to say a bit about the Na'a'ilihi Fund. I'm the board chair right now, and I've been on the board and involved with Na'a'ilihi since about 2015. And the Na'a'ilihi Fund serves as a bridge builder and a resource partner to catalyze towards positive futures for our tribal communities. And our scope of impact includes urban and rural, island and reservation-based Indigenous communities, from the Arctic to the Rockies, and in what's known now as Alaska, British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. So that's our service area. We're celebrating 20 years for the power and vision empowerment of our Native community and the lands we live in relationship with. So I want to start us off in a good way by reflecting and honoring this change of season as we head into fall. The equinox just happened, and the change of season is often a time to reflect. It's harvest time where we're still bringing in the fruits of our labor from the summer, but it's also a time to get ready and store things and pickle and cure and smoked meats. And so, if you think about the traditional foods that feed your soul, and that food is medicine, and that, we're heading into the time when we do planning and reflect on what we learned in the past year in the next 3 months here. So I just want to take a minute to honor the fall and say, yay, sweater weather. I hope y'all have killer boots to wear. So I want to talk a bit about the webinar format. This session will not involve a Q&A that features. It'll be disabled on our screens, but the chat will only be seen by our administrative team, and they'll pass me questions or let me know if there's any issues. But feel free to share your love for the speakers and their words, like using the heart. I've already seen some hearts go by. I love that. Good feelings, right? We'll be doing a raffle at the end by showing up and registering for tonight's webinar. We entered your name and we'll choose 3 names at random at the end. So don't sign up early unless you have tonight the raffle winners. We'll each get, the raffle winners will get a beautiful gift from 8th Generation, and we're supporting Native artists, right? Inspired natives, not native inspired, as they say there. We just love that store. So tonight's stories and poems are gifts freely given and freely shared with you, and they are personal and cultural treasures to be treated with respect and honored with gratitude. Please take what you learn with you and share what you learned, but please do not take the stories themselves, as they belong to the people that will share them and the families and the tribes who've chosen to share them tonight. So with that, I want to move on with introducing our speakers. They're going to go in this order. First up is Natosha Tobin, and then Rena Priest, followed by Tai Simpson. And I'm going to hand it now over to Natosha, where she will introduce herself. Thank you so much, everyone.
Ollí gwalapo hat siayaya hat de ishid. As boot lachi bitabullid, twaltis alap altiet slachel. Schlalolitza sali seeds da. Stohobs chad chadas doqualbu, chad chadas poela pabj, chad chadas sakbu e soyatbu, chad chadas kajatabj, to all chaduflela. Gobin Young Tibadaligwa de Ishid, Hill Price T Squayaligwa de Ishid. Obs Budbadat Chud Aquid Salalats, Dos Chawatil Chud, Chada Dos Squad, Chud Chada Dos Ugusalek at T Doflashutzid. Good evening. My Indian name is Shlalolitsa Tu. My English name is Natosha Tobin. I am of Snohomish, Snoqualmie, Saxuado, Skagit, and Puyallup descent, a member of the Tulalip tribes. My mother's side of my family are the Hill and Price families, and my father's side of my family are the Tobin and Young families. I'm a proud mother of 5 kids. My oldest is about to turn 19, and my youngest is 10. I am a student first, always learning, a student, a speaker, and a teacher of the Northern dialect of Lushootseed. I have had the blessing to be able to learn, speak, and teach Lushootseed for going on, or actually I just celebrated 24 years. And something very special tonight, this is the first time I've been able to introduce myself with my new identity. This weekend, I just received my identity, my Indian name, Shlalolitsa Sali. It's a name that I share with my mother, Candy Hill Wells, and it's a name that belonged to my late grandmother, Della Shlalolitsa Price Hill, and it does go back 7 generations for me. I want to raise my hands to each and every one of you for being here this evening. I look forward to sharing a couple of stories that are near and dear to me.
Okay, so this is Bridget, and each speaker is going to introduce themselves before they speak. So Natosha, if you just want to continue on with your story.
So move on with my storytelling?
Yes, it's your time,
okay,
girl.
sorry,
Shine.
I wasn't sure if we were all introducing ourselves first. All right. Shlu Yahob Tabutlid Chud. I'm going to share a couple stories with you this evening. And what I love about storytelling is I carry with me some of my favorite stories, and I never really have it mapped out like, oh, I'm going to tell this one, I'm going to tell that one. Whatever comes to me in that moment is the one that I feel like somebody in the audience might need to be able to hear it. And another beautiful thing with our traditional stories is it's not up to me to tell you what the teaching is. It's up to you to be able to find a teaching within that story. We can hear these hundreds of times throughout our lifetime, and whatever transition we're going through, we're going to pick a different piece of that story, or it's going to have a whole different meaning. The first one I'm going to share with you is actually one that for the longest time, I couldn't find the meaning. I couldn't figure out what this story meant. And being a teacher and utilizing these stories and teaching them to the kids, we tell them over and over. And sometimes people ask, like, well, what does that story mean? What is it teaching? And it's easy to say, well, that's up to you to decide. But this one came to me, the meaning came to me at what I feel was a very critical time. And some of you may have heard this story, and you may have your own teaching that you've gathered from it. And I'm going to share with you what I learned from it. This is the story of Sia Bustad, Lady Louse. Tu Yahob Tubush Chash, or Tu Yahob Tubush Sia Lizzie Christ. And this is a traditional story that was passed on by the late Lizzie Christ. This story, as all of our stories, takes place all too hot a long time ago. A slashlil husi bastad. Al tahek al die que quiguasias. Hoi gual quadada gual equida. Tia he al ka shekwil. Huolaf o deguijalaf alta als hoi huela. Shabsho bustad. Lady Louse lived there in a big house. She was all alone. She didn't have any friends or relatives. And so she picked it up and got lost. Lady Louse disappeared. Dies Hoys. That's the end of that part of the story. So this traditional story that is very, very short, for the longest time, I couldn't figure out what the meaning was behind it. Some people could look at that story as like, well, there was a lot of dirt, so maybe she lived in filth. Maybe that's why she didn't have any friends or relatives. And people can try to come up with the appearance of what this traditional story could be. And it wasn't until I was at a gathering with some middle school tribal youth from all over the state. And when we all came together and I told that story, it finally came to me what my meaning of Lady Louse was. And what I learned from that is I'm Lady Louse. And my big house could be my house, it could be my community, it could be the world that we live in. And there are moments where I go through life and I feel alone. And I feel like I'm all by myself. And although I have family surrounding me, like I just mentioned, I have 5 kids. Even though I have my kids around me, there are some things that I go through where I feel alone. Like all of the weight of the world is on my shoulders and it's up to me to get through it. So I feel all alone, like I have nobody to help me through this. And when I think about the moments of picking up the broom and starting to sweep, well, what does that mean? Does that mean when I'm going through these moments, I'm trying to think about what needs to be taken care of? What can I do next? How do I fix a situation? And that's where we start looking at these different piles. And when I look at those piles, I have 5 piles that are my kids. And they're not worthless piles of dirt. These are beautiful piles of my kids' feelings, their needs, their what's going on in school, how are they doing with their friends, are they playing sports? So each kid is their individual pile. And as I mentioned, I'm a teacher. So then now I'm starting to create these piles that are my students and my students' families, and then my coworkers and my parents and my siblings. I start to create all of these piles. And sometimes that gets overwhelming for us when we try to think to ourselves, oh my gosh, how can in my mind, how can I clean up all of these thoughts, all of these things that I have to tend to? And I didn't even mention the materialistic things. And just to make this story really relevant, I had some homeowners issues today they ended up being a major distraction for me and a major stress. So there's the pile of being a homeowner. So we can think about the materialistic things. We can think about the people in our lives and how much they mean to us is that they are a pile in our mind that we want to tend to. So when we get in the middle of all of these things and we look at all of these things that we love and care for that are all around us, sometimes we do get lost. Sometimes we feel like we're just surrounded by so much. And what does it mean at that ending part when it says, and Lady Louse disappeared? Maybe we disappear from all of those thoughts of things that are out of our control. And we're going to move on to a place where things don't feel so heavy, where things don't feel like the weight of the world is on our shoulders. So that is one of the things that I learned from the traditional story of Lady Louse, is I took away the outer appearance of Lady Louse, of what people thought of her, that, oh, this is some woman that is just wretched and lives all by herself, and she's just such a dirty person. I can't take a teaching away from that. But the teaching I was able to take away from that is looking at all of the things around us and not getting lost in the things we can't control, and being able to disappear away from the heaviness and go to a place of gratitude and go to a place where we can take care of ourselves and where we can take care of the people around us. So that is one of the teachings that I learned from one of our traditional stories. And another to move on to that I get a calling to, that's also very personal, is the traditional story of Skedak, of rattlesnake. Al tudi tuha a tia stobsh al shakabets at tispadil. Long ago, there was a man at the top of a mountain. Ubakwob, ubakwob. It started to snow. Dai ast ah tiish stobsh. And that man started to get cold. Hoi ushlag. And so he left. He started to make his way down the mountain. Ulud quistab. Ulud quigwa. He heard something calling out to him. He heard somebody calling out to him. Quahwats, quahwats, die chadas, help me, I'm really, really cold. I need you to help me, take me with you. Hoi ashud tiish skeda. And that man looked and he saw that it was Rattlesnake. Us hide guaguatas. And that man knew who Rattlesnake was. He knew that Rattlesnake was not safe. Hoi balae bashti stobsh but So that man continued on. Again, he was going on home. Altisa Abash ulud quigwa. And as he continued his walk, he heard it again. Qua what stobs, please take pity on me. I need your help. Please take me with you. I can't survive up here. It's so cold. Hoy aside guaguatas, but he knew exactly who it was. He knew that Rattlesnake was not a safe one. Bala ebash tistobsh. And so he continued on his walk. Altisa ebash uquia tiil skeda. And as he was walking, Rattlesnake continued over and over, pleading for that man to help him out. Until the point where he got tired of it. Come here, Rattlesnake. I take pity on you. If I take you down the mountain, you must promise that you're not going to bite me. Hoy utsut Ob siab. Okay, honorable one. Please, yes, take me with you. I promise I won't bite you. I promise. Thank you for pitying me. Thank you for taking me with you. Hoy quadadov tiil skeda gualas quadad. And so he picked up Rattlesnake and he started to carry him down the mountain. Hoy tilab. And then all of a sudden, Rattlesnake bit the man. Achada! Stop Quadzuhoy! Oh my goodness, what are you doing? You told me you wouldn't bite me. Why did you bite me? I'm trying to help you. Hoy and Rattlesnake said, Ashide Wagwatad, you knew who I was. You knew that you shouldn't have trusted me. You knew that you should have left me there, but you gave in to that temptation and you decided to take me with you. So I had to teach you a lesson. For that traditional story, I hold that one close to my heart because I made the choice for the second time around. I made the choice to walk the red road. And in July, I celebrated 8 years of sobriety. And that traditional story really hits close to home because it's that reminder that even though we have temptation that can be all around us, we know what's good for us and we know what's not good for us. And we have that reminder that even though we can see other people and even people close to us that are out there living that life, that we know what's good for us and we know what's not good for us. So that is one of the traditional stories that I love to be able to share. And that doesn't just talk about sobriety, but it talks about other things. And I think it's a great one for us to share with our youth as well. I do have one more that I would like to tell. This story is, of course, another emotional one. And this is the traditional story of Kaya Chapayetz, the traditional story of Grandmother Cedar. Altudi tuha sia Kaya Chapayetz. Long ago, there stood Grandmother Cedar Tree. Uchab yache dayai. And she started to cry because she felt so lonely. There were all of these trees around her, but she felt lonely, like she didn't have somebody there for her. Hoy latu shafwab, and then it started, the wind started. Gwobachad qui mitman chapayet chitad sikaya. And it dropped this little sapling right next to Grandmother Cedar. Alti as gakab, when it would get sunny out. She stretched her arm out and she would shield her grandchild from the sun. Alti latsu shafwab, and when the wind would start up, She would wrap her branches around her grandchild to protect them from the wind. And when the ones with antlers would start walking around, she would brush them away with her branches so they couldn't nibble on her grandchild. And when it was silent out, she would call the birds to her branches. And they would sing. Lalot il tiish nitman chapayetz. And that little grandson grew up. Lalot il tiish kayetz. And his grandmother started to get older as well. Altias gakab. When it got sunny, he would stretch his arms out and he would protect his grandmother. Altilatsu shafwab. And when it would get windy, kuolod.
Get cough, a little bit of like dryness in the change of season. I know I do. So and I saw a lot of heart reactions during the rattlesnake story. I think a lot of us can relate to that. You know, the risks you take with everyday decisions. And I forgot to mention earlier, there she is. You okay? Okay, we're almost there. We're almost there. We got a few more minutes. So, yeah.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you
I'm
now.
in a smaller room and it's kicking stuff around in here. All right.
Ah.
All right. Hoi gwol al ti saeba shati ish absquadak. When the ones with antlers would come around, uhewilt. He would push them away from his grandmother. Ay, ay, ay.
Hello, everybody. While Natasha figures out where she's going, I'm not sure if it froze or what, but I did want to mention that Natasha spent some time with us in the Sovereign Futures cohort. So we got to talk to her every day, along with some other Native folks who were learning about sustainable infrastructure and project development. And there were a lot of projects focused on community gardens and medicine, gardens, and food that would feed, feed the spirit, feed the people. And so that was when I first met Natosha and heard her tell stories in the native language, and to be able to share the language is such a gift. So I want to take a moment to appreciate that as well. I think we will, and we've got, another 5 minutes or so. Kind of we're not beholden to time, but we're respectful of it, since it is a construct and all. And I'm just going to, now might be a great time to grab your roll of crackers. All right, well, it looks like we will move things along here. So I just want to take a moment to thank Natosha for sharing what she could. And sometimes the tech gremlins do get us, or the change in weather. So, but thank you for the gift of your stories. And I really appreciate hearing the language, and that you keep that knowledge, and you help us all with those teachings. So our next speaker today is Rena Priest, and she'll be sharing A View from My Window, which is a workshop on perspective as a superpower. And I just want to say, as a couple of words before Rena introduces herself, that she served as the 6th Washington State Poet Laureate from 2021 to 2023. And her work appears widely online and in print. And she's got recognized awards and fellowships with the University of Washington Libraries and the Indigenous Nations Poets, the Academy of American Poets, and the Allied Arts Foundation. And she holds her MFA from Sarah Lawrence College and currently serves as a judge for the 2024 National Book Award for Poetry. And I met Rena on Canoe Journey and was just blown away. So I immediately bought the 2 books that I could get my hands on. And it's just such a treat to have you today, to have you here with us today, Rena. And if you would like to go ahead, please.
Hi, Shka. Thank you so much. Ai tangan nostalgia, o helixan quanasat latiakais, hueltanat, sanasnat, chlamisan. So happy to be here with you all this evening. I have a little glare. I apologize, but I think I can't get rid of it. I've tried this and it doesn't go away. So anyhow, just very delighted to be with you all this evening. Some of what Natosha shared about interpretation of storytelling set me up really nicely. And I'm just gonna, another thing that I sometimes forget to do is talk about my ancestry. So I'm appreciative that that came up too in Natosha's talk. My ancestral name is Sahueltana, and I share that with my maternal grandmother. And my great grandmother was Edith Lane, and my grandmother is Rena Lane Ballou, and my great grandmother was Sadie Celestine Jones. My great grandfather was Alfred Lane, and also Betty Hammerly, whose maiden name was Solomon. So those are my relatives. She was my grandmother on my father's side. So I have a few images to share with you to start us off, and I'm just going to go ahead and do that now. Start at the beginning. Okay. So I just want to invite everybody to look at this image here and consider, what is that for just a minute? Just what is it? Think about it. How would you describe it? And then this, what is that? As writers, you know, we try, as storytellers, we try to look at the world, understand it, and then describe it for somebody else in a way that makes sense, hopefully for them as well as for us. So, how would you describe this? Or this? Just some quiet consideration there. It's all the moon. It's all the moon. All of those images are the moon. So you got this one, this one, this one, and that one. That's just a moon rock. This is shards of moon rocks cut into little tiny slides and placed under a microscope. And then, of course, that's the moon over Bellingham. This is the view from my childhood home on the Lummi Reservation, looking across the bay at Bellingham and our mountain there in the background. And then this is a particle. This is I asked the moon scientist who shared these slides with me if I could share them. He said, yes, please do share. I like for people to experience lunar samples. The moon is for everyone. I've also attached an SEM image of a glass volcanic sphere taken from the lunar soil. So this is a little glass bead about the diameter of a human hair, and it was hit by a piece of dust traveling at 30,000 miles an hour. So you're looking at a very tiny impact crater on a tiny piece of the moon. So it's just different ways of looking at things. And I think that's what we all love about story so much, right? Is that it lets us zero in on things and see things from a different perspective. It lets us zoom out and see things from far away, a bigger picture. And it really changes how our emotional reactions are. And so this is kind of like a superpower. You know, we can get so caught up in our own lives and our own stories that we forget that we're part of something bigger, that we're actually part of this big, beautiful, shining, shimmering, fiery, pulsating universe that, you know, that we belong to this planet. And the moon is in a symbiotic relationship with us. If we didn't have the moon, we wouldn't have tides and we wouldn't have all of the beautiful abundance that is the result of water moving the way it does. I listened to a whole thing on Radiolab. It was really cool. Anyhow, so, you know, the moon, the moon. Oh, and then this is grass. This is a cross section of a blade of grass viewed under an electron microscope. And so there are worlds that we don't see and that we don't understand, but we can understand them by looking at them through story, right? We can understand our own hearts by looking at them through story. When I first became our state's poet laureate, I would sometimes get asked to share the word for poem or poet in our Chlamychasan. So I went to my teachers and I asked, I'm not a fluent speaker. I'm still learning. Istitamsin, I'm doing my best. Tutatistin, I'm still learning. And so I went to my Aksalas, my teachers, and said, what's the word for poem? And they said, or poet. And they said, well, a poem can be a shwiam, it can be a stilum, or it can be tiwich, which is a shwiam is a story, a stilum is a song, and tiwich is a prayer. And I really loved that explanation for what a poem is. And it has been all three of those things for me throughout my life. And so I'm going to share a few poems that sort of tell stories. And I'll start with this one, since we just had that image of that little speck of water on that piece of grass. I'll start with this one called To the Water Keepers. And it's going to appear in a documentary about Seattle next year. the director, he said, okay, you've got about 30 seconds. We're going to open the film with this poem. And so I thought something short. Okay. So this is a sonnet to the water keepers. In the timeline of Howells, the great changer, our human lives are the blink of an eye, a snowflake falling on a blue glacier, wispy breath of cloud in an azure sky, particle of mist lifting a rainbow from a waterfall's dramatic cascade. And though our lives are but a flake of snow, drop of rain, sparkle of a cresting wave, together we are also the glacier, the salmon stream, the endless turning tides, ebbing and flowing. We are the changer. In us, the spirit of water resides. We have been here for a very long time, holding sacred knowledge that water is life. So the prompt for that, he gave me the imagery about, kind of like prehistory and what this landscape was like right after the glaciers receded. And, before there were trees and it was just a rocky, barren landscape but there was water, right? And then the salmon came. And then the people came, Lummi came down out of the Fraser River Valley and settled in the islands in the San Juan Islands. That's where Straight Salish. And so I thought about that imagery, and Al was going to be the perfect guy to start that story off with. So one of the things that I love about those stories about Hal's, the changer, is that it opens up the world for possibility. It opens up, this idea about change being like the only constant, right? And that you just really can't fight it. We didn't have God the Father and all that. We had Hal's, the changer, and he would travel around from place to place. And there's all these stories about, the kinds of shenanigans and things he got up to while he was walking around through the world. And one of them is a story about how he used to really like to enjoy the beach. He loved the beach, and he'd be hanging out there on the beach, just enjoying the turn of the tide and the sparkling waves. And then he noticed one day that there were just these gossiping little people, just always gossiping, just, psst, guess what I heard? Psst, psst, guess what I heard? Always under their breath gossiping. And he just kind of thought, well, this makes it less pleasant. And I'm going to tell these little gossips, stop that, stop gossiping. I'm trying to enjoy the beach. And so they did, they thought, okay, we'll stop, but only for a little while. And then before you know it, they start back up. Psst, guess what I heard? Psst, guess what I heard? Psst. And so Howells told them again, you better quit that or, it's going to be bad. And so again, okay. Anyways, it happens again. He says, this is the last time. So, of course, what do they do? Psst, guess what I heard? So Howells, with one sweep of his arm, gathers up all of these little people, and then he sweeps away the tide and casts them out under the mud. And he turns them all to clams. So they're down there grinning ear to ear. And when you're out there on the tide flats at low tide, you can still hear them trying to gossip. Psst, psst, guess what I heard? Psst. And so, the other thing about Howells, so then he swept the tide back over him and enjoyed his peace and quiet again, enjoyed the beach. But the other thing about Howells is that you don't know what appearance he's going to come in. There's a story about how we got fire, and the people knew that Howells was coming, but there was no set date. And so, but they wanted to be prepared. So they were working on getting a big feast together so that they'd have, food and everything nice for him when he got there. So his daughters woke up early in the morning and they were dancing around a bowl with salmon in it, with shining sunlight on it, singing a song saying, quickly cook, quickly cook. And then a man comes up in a canoe, And he says, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And the family that was preparing for Halls, they said, "Oh, well, we heard the changer is coming, and so we're preparing something nice for him. So we're trying to make it really nice." And so the man says, "Oh, okay. Well, I think since your intentions are so good and you've got such a nice thing set up for the changer here, I'm going to help you out." And then he gives them fire, right? And they didn't know that he was the changer. And so that's, of course, a big change that happens when you get fire. Then you can quickly cook your delicious meals. Um, so sometimes, you get turned into clams for gossiping, and sometimes you get fire for preparing a nice way for a guest. And you never know who or what form Hal's is going to come in. So those are two fun traditional stories. The first one is from our hereditary chief, our late hereditary chief, Salik. Bill James was his English name. And he taught that to my Oksala, Matthew Warbus, or Smakia. And then they taught it to me. And I went to see Salik before he passed away, and I was visiting with him, and I said, can I share some of these stories? Would it be okay if I wrote them down? Because, it's kind of taboo. That's how I was taught. I said, would it be okay if I wrote some of these down? And he said, "Oh, well, they're all over YouTube anyway, so go ahead." Not that that's permission for anybody else to do it, but I thought that was kind of a funny answer. And so the other story came actually from, it was shared by Frank Hilaire with a man named Bernard Stearns, and it was documented, and I came across it in some research, and I thought it was really beautiful. Kind of love all those stories about Hal's. So back to this idea about story being a superpower, perspective being a superpower. As a writer, we say that writing is thinking, and if you can change what you think, or if you can change what you write, just cross it out and change it and write something else, you can change what you think. And so you can do that same editing with your thoughts, and it's a little harder, but it's possible. And so this poem is it's called Heart Passage, and I wrote it to go with a piece of music that a friend of mine wrote, thinking about poetry being like a song. He wrote this song called Heart Passage about a landscape in New Mexico. And he showed a picture of this arch to the elders, and they told him about the little wash underneath it. And they said, that's a perfect piece of land. And when you have to remember that all human beings, when we come into this world, we're perfect. And it's just that when life gets a hold of us and stressors and other things like that, we forget that. And that's when we need to get back to the heart passage and remember that we're perfect beings. And so this is for anyone struggling. September is National Suicide Awareness Month. And I've had a lot of bleak, hard days in my life, and have been comforted often by poetry. And hopefully this may be that to somebody. Usually it's accompanied by music, but I'll do my best here to find the music. Heart Passage. On the path we walk toward purpose, if we feel we've lost our way, if our confidence deserts us and we fear we've gone astray, when the road stretched out before us is a challenging terrain, this is when we search our heart for a passage back to grace. Our heart has wisdom to impart if we are true and brave, and though the night is dark, there is always a new day. When every door we try is locked, and the view out every window is of that lonely road we walked, full of worry, want, and woe. When the stream of life within is blocked by living in our sorrow, this is when we search our heart for a passage to tomorrow. Our heart has wisdom to impart if we are true to what we feel. Yes, indeed, the night is dark, but our hearts have answers to reveal. They say living is a simple art when we follow our true, perfect being, and will not stumble in the dark when we let our hearts do all the seeing. That is that poem. And let's see here. Got a couple more minutes left, so I think I'll just share, since we're talking about names, I'll share another one that will be part of a documentary and then pass it along. Let's see here. Okay. This one's called To the Net Wife. O ancient weaver, whose ancestral name I carry, how many hours of your beautiful life were spent gathering the wild-grown riches of our home, willow roots and nettles for the reef net, the sight of the soft glow of mountainsides in winter, the sparkle of sun shining on summer rivers. This beauty wakes the ancestors who live inside me, call forth memories of creeks overflowing with the red riches of spawning salmon. And I know your saltwater blood still runs in me like a gift from salmon brought home from the dark of the ocean deep, carried high into rocky valleys against swift currents of sparkling streams to dissolve and rise again like fog, burned away by the rising of a new day, to shine again within me. My eyes are your eyes, as one identity we see. Across thousands of generations, we dance the dances of the salmon people, bear witness to endless turning tides and rolling waves. With your voice, I sing songs of praise. With the breath of your spirit, I lift prayers to the breeze. Like baby spiders with new silk kites, they soar high above the world and into the future. Like your prayers were carried across time to me, through me, to weave new webs, new nets, to catch nourishment for the people, to see hope, to speak love, to live for the salmon people, to be an ember, a spark that carries our fire through the night. And so that just, in my own way, tells the story of my name. Let's see here. When I was given my name, I was very little, very, very small. And we stood for like 7 hours. But I remember that everyone, all these elders coming and talking to me. And one of the elders told me, you're not going to know right now what your name means. You're going to learn. Somebody is going to come and tell you. But you carry it, and you carry it with honor for the people who shared that with you, who shared that identity with you, and try to live in a good way. And so I didn't know what the name meant for a long time until I started undertaking to try to learn my language. And I learned that sewalt is the word for spider web, and it's also the word for net. And tanat is the word of the wife of, so the net wife. And that would have been the woman who would have woven the net for the reef net. And so that person ensured that the family received a portion of the catch for her family. And so to learn this, it's really beautiful. And then also the baby spider and the idea of weaving, that a sewalt is also a spider web. Sort of gives it a little bit of a magical quality in a way. I think that connection. So anyhow, I am so pleased to have been invited to share a few words with you all, share a few stories, a few poems, a little bit about how perspective is a superpower, and I hope that you all enjoyed your time with me this evening. Hi, Shka.
Thank you so much, Rena. Yay, that was amazing. Especially about weaving. there's just so many lessons. The basket is a song, the basket is a story. Weaving is a long and honored tradition, and basket builders, basket makers have helped us and enriched our lives in so many ways, right? And there's just so many teachings, and there's different ways that we use weaving in a modern sense of, I like to say I weave people together. And so Spider Woman, and that was just so cool. So appreciate that. I'm going to take that one home with me. I did want to mention Natosha had lost her technical connection, but she left some words for us that are, I believe, in the chat. I don't know if I need to read those, but okay. Natosha couldn't get her connection back, but here are her closing thoughts she sent via text. Grandmother Cedar took time to love and care for the sapling until it became a strong tree that in turn took care of her, protecting her, shielding her from the elements, and bringing joy and company to her. Grandmother Cedar is a story that we can use to remind us to take time to pass on our teachings, and reminds us to take time for one another, especially our elders. I feel lucky that I was raised with my grandmothers in my life, and although they're no longer here, I do my best to carry their teachings of love, compassion, and empowerment forward. So thank you, Natosha, for your closing remarks. I'm sorry we lost our connection, but those are some wonderful words to close out the day, and that feels good. And now it's my pleasure to bring on our third and final speaker today, Tai Simpson. And Tai is going to introduce themselves.
I absolutely will. Tots kalawat, tots lahain, inem wanitwas atit watit, siapo wanitwas, Tai Simpson, in wasni mipu katsitamuch ayet, laloit zatkina, katsiaya oikalo, ka lautiwama. I'm happy to be here. And I told you in Nimi Putipt that my name is the storyteller, and I am a citizen of the Nez Perce tribe and also a Black woman. I think that storytelling culture is indigenous worldwide, and I'm grateful for both the matriarchy of indigenous women in the what we now call the United States, and the Black girl magic that has been passed down from Africa into me by way of enslavement and survival and resilience. I am the daughter of medicine women and the granddaughter of medicine women and the great-granddaughter of a medicine woman and the great-great-great-granddaughter of another storyteller. So it skipped a few generations and made its way to me. And much like Rena was talking about, we're given our names so very young, and then somehow almost ancestral wisdom, we grow into those names and understand who we need to be in the world. And I am the storyteller in all of its iterations, storytelling in whatever way comes, a vessel for stories told by my ancestors, carrying a gift of the language and of their wisdom and of their love and of their joy. And I'm writing a story with my life. We are all writing a story with our lives as a gift to our descendants. How are you showing up in a good way? How are you creating ritual and practice in yourselves that your descendants will honor on their altars 7 generations, 10 generations, 20,000 years down the road? And I'm here as your Afrofuturist girly, as your Indigenous futurist girly, because what we do know is these stories and these poems that you've heard tonight in the language are old. And they've given us a way, a framework of understanding the world. We are all living in dystopia for what our people knew. We're living in a way that is imbalanced with nature, disconnected from each other. And we knew it was coming. Like so many things in nature, we know that seasons change, that nature is merciless and treacherous, but there's always new growth, and there's always a calm, and there's always room for a deep breath and new growth. And that's what futurism in our storytelling is. I'm a radical futurist, and that is the title of my work today, and the title of what I want to share. Radical futurism. We currently live in systems brought to us by patriarchy, by capitalism, by white supremacy, by Christianity, that have deeply marginalized our people, harmed our people, minoritized our people. And we feel the acute effects of that spiritually, emotionally, in our communities. But radical futurism is everything else that survived into the now, so that we can write a story for the future that's not about systems. It's not about who elects who. It's not about who's voting for what. What radical futurism means is that we have been given tools for a path forward, for a way forward that's couched in our ability to think collectively, our ability to love generously, our expansiveness that both imitates nature and each other. It's not a political position. Radical is courage in the face of ridicule and marginalization, when we care for each other and care for ourselves. Radical futurism is about deep, deep compassion and empathy, and it is our journey together to know that a world is possible where we're liberated and where we're free. And we know this because our ancestors have given us and told us all of these stories that live in us genetically. They live in our laughter, they live in our breath, they live in our hair and in our dance and in our music. They live in our beadwork. One of my favorite stories to tell is not a story of the future, but a story of the past. My mom learned how to do her beadwork when she was 10 years old from my great-grandma. And by the time that my mom had learned how to do beadwork, my great-grandma had gone blind. And so mom would, 8, 9, and 10 years old, lay her beads down and pass the buckskin to her grandma. And her gram would close her eyes and feel along the buckskin. And she would nod, and then she would furrow her brow. And then she would pass that buckskin back to my mom and say, "The beads are too tight. They're crooked. Take it out." And then my mom would get frustrated at 10 years old and take it out and do it again. She'd lay 2 or 3 more rows, and she'd pass it back to Graham and say, "Is it right, Graham?" And so Graham would feel it with her fingers as if her fingers had eyes, and feel the tension and roll the beads and squish the buckskin and pass it back and say, "Nope, those beads are too tight. It's crooked. Take it out." Over and over and over again, the summer that my mom spent with her Graham. And when my mom was teaching me how to bead, she never took my beadwork away. She never felt the beads. She never made me take out the work. And I asked her once, "Mom, why did Graham make you take the beads out? Why did your katzat make you take the beads out?" And my mom told me in all of her wisdom, much like the world is our beadwork and our beadwork is like the world, it's not so much about how we're beading, but why we're beading. We are laying the beads in a good way, with love and in a good spirit. We are laying the beads in a pattern and in a way where they have to sit nicely for each other and together. One individual bead doesn't make or break the beadwork, but the collective beads are what make the piece beautiful and what give it life. And so her katzat wasn't telling her to take the beads out for singular beads. Her katzat was showing her that we take our time and we lay together and we work together for community and in a collective. And I've always taken that away. Thank goodness mom never made me take my beads out, because I would have lost my damn mind the way my neurospicy is set up. But it makes sense, right? Think about all the old beadwork that survived generations of displacement, generations of violence, generations of colonization. We have traded whole herds of our horses for handfuls of beads and have created the most amazing stories in our buckskin dresses, in our beaded shirts, in our moccasins, because we always went back and took the beads out so they laid just right, not too tight, not too loose. And think about the world now where all these individual beads and we're trying to cram together and the thread is too tight and we're crooked. Now is the time, with the story that we're writing with our lives, to go back and straighten the beads, to go back and recognize and honor these old lessons and old wisdom that, regardless of how much of a sordid history exists between Native people and our non-Native neighbors, there's room to straighten the beads. There's room to lay them just right. There's room to recognize that there's tension and conflict, but there's always love. There's always the big picture and there's always the collective, and we can get the beads to lay just right. And as radical as that sounds, it is our way and our journey forward to lay the beads together just right, to lean into conflict in a good way that says, this hurts, I'm hurt, my people are hurt. How do we fix it and journey forward together in a way where we can be with each other in a good way? And that hope has lived with us for thousands of years. These stories are generations old, passed between great-great-grandmother to grandmother to mom to me. And I love to be able to share that story. And I think about that in my work. My day job, I'm an anti-racism and anti-oppression educator. And I think that it's important to remember, as hard of the days are when I'm trying to teach people that there is more than one way to be in the world, that I am doing my best to straighten the beadwork that my mom passed on to me, that her mom and her grandma passed on to her. And that's my commitment, my radical futurist commitment to the descendants that come after me. When they hold my beadwork, they're going to know that Auntie Tai, Grandma Tai, Great Grandma Tai took her time and she laid the beads just right. And so think about that for a moment. What are you doing in your own life to lay your beads just right? And keep in mind, I'm not saying perfect. Nothing is perfect, but how do you get your beads to lay just right, where you're in balance with yourself, where you care for yourself to such a degree that you have abundance and care and give to others? How are you laying your beads that demonstrate how courageous you could be in a world that would have us making 15-second TikToks in the middle of a grocery store? What are we doing instead of that? In a world that has us committed to self-checkout and Uber Eats, never having to see another human, how are you connecting to other humans in a good way and to the land? That's what it is to live in a radical future. I'm going to tell a hard story. So I want some of you to hold, and I'm going to give you a couple of trigger warnings. I'm going to talk a little bit about suicide. I'm going to talk a little bit about sexual and domestic violence. So if those things are heavy for you, please step away, or at the very least, lean into the tension for your own healing. Take a deep breath. Hold on to your water. There's power and spirit in your water that can protect you. A couple of years ago, it's been about 3 years or so, somebody died in my life. And this man I met when I was very, very young, and he groomed me into a relationship. I was with him off and on for 10 years of my life. And in those 10 years, I endured financial abuse, physical violence, sexual abuse, isolation from my people and from my family, narcissism. My own self-esteem and personality and humanity was demeaned and diminished to such an extent I thought I would never find myself again. And at 10 years, when we tried to really recommit to making it work, it didn't work and we went our separate ways. And he still exacted his violence on me, terrorized me from thousands of miles away. I spent years looking over my shoulder, thinking he'd show up, thinking that when I'd answer the door, he'd be there, the source of his rage. And then one day I get a phone call that he died. that he unalived himself during a traffic stop. A Black man who struggled with being in and out of prison and making poor decisions for him and his family. A man whose trauma evolved into pain, and pain evolved into violence, and that violence he pushed outward like a storm. And I was at my mom's home when I found out. And she was downstairs puttering, and I was upstairs bawling my eyes out. A flood, 15 years of emotion that I had carefully packed away like a Capricorn in a house made of wet Kleenex. And then I took a deep breath and went downstairs to tell my mom what was happening. And I was terrified to tell her because I knew my mom had watched me be abused and hurt by this man for 10 years of my life and took me in every single time after it happened. And I told her, I said, Mom, he died. And just allowed myself that gut-wrenching cry where it feels like your spirit will just fall out of your body in your tears. Where your body hurts, your shoulders crunch up to your ears and your stomach tightens and nothing seems to work in your body. That's how deep and treacherous that cry was for me. Oh, and bless my mother's heart for holding that space. In the days that followed, I spent a lot of time going slow, taking in deep breaths, really thinking about what it meant for my abuser, who I had not unloved, to take his journey, for me to now feel free, but for also in those moments to feel deep, deep despair that I had lost somebody I thought I was deeply connected to. And my mom, in her wisdom, bless her heart, told another story. She said, you know, your palachat, your grandpa, went to war. He went to Vietnam, a happy, jovial warrior, a man who loved fishing and telling jokes and playing pranks on the people. He went to war. And when he came home, he was deeply, deeply traumatized, in a lot of pain. And that pain turned into violence, and he pushed that violence outward like a storm onto your grandmother. And when he died, because he drowned that pain in alcohol, your Katsa, she cried that same treacherous, painful cry. The one where your ears crunch up, your shoulders crunch up to your ears, and your stomach feels like knives, and it feels like your spirit will cry itself out of your body. And she said, she asked her mom, Itza, why are you crying for him when he hurt you, when he hit you, when he abused you? And my Kata, in all of her wisdom, said, leaving an abuser is not unloving him. I have 7 children with this man. And somewhere in there, somewhere past the violence, somewhere past the pain, somewhere past the trauma, is the grandpa, is the man that I know and loved and had 7 children with, the warrior who loved to play pranks and crack jokes in community. And he is in my beadwork. And to hear that story about my gram enduring abuse and surviving and loving him through it, and to hear my mom reflect back and echo my own story to me, was really, really powerful about how our people hold hope and how we hold love and how we hold compassion and empathy, even in abuse, even in the most treacherous, painful, narcissistic relationship I've ever had. I've never unloved him, but I had to learn to love myself more. My Katsa never unloved him, but she learned to love herself and her babies more. And in that love is where we find compassion and understand that the violence is a symptom of their pain, and their pain is a symptom of their trauma. We live in a world that tells us that trauma makes us no longer human, no longer worthy of love, no longer worthy of laughter, no longer worthy of safety or community. And our radical future that we are beading together, as we lay beads together in this community, that radical future is in that love, in that hope, in that compassion, and in that empathy. These systems that oppress us, the systems that marginalize us, are not our fault. It happened to us. And so now we are collectively enduring trauma. And that trauma is collectively evolving into pain. And that pain is now collectively evolving into violence. So if we hold ourselves with the same love, hope, compassion, and empathy that we have and have shown and have had demonstrated to us, we're going to create a world where we know that this violence can't and doesn't exist, because it has existed before. I talk about radical futurism all the time, and people look at me sideways. I'm like, no, no, no. This world of balance and of love and of hope and of compassion has existed before me, because it lives in me and it lives in each of you. And I want you to remember that. So think deeply. How are you showing up in your life to lay your beads well? How are you showing up in your life to love yourself in abundance so that you can find love, hope, compassion, and empathy for others, even when our beads are laying crooked? Mike was my crooked bead. And I was able to go back and love him through his journey and his transition and learn to love myself. And in that moment, call my spirit back. Same went for my mom, and same went for my katzat. So you see, radical futures aren't just about the old stories that we know. It's about what are the lessons we're learning from what we've already been through. And that's my offering to you tonight. And so I would invite everybody again to take a deep collective breath. We've talked about a couple of hard things, but remember that radical futurism is the best way that we can honor our ancestors who prayed us here and loved us into existence. So what does it look like for you to write a story with your life where you are praying and loving your descendants into existence in a good way? It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Beautiful words and sentiment. Just a lot of love there, and the really great way to wrap up our evening of amazing speakers. And thank you all, Chi Miigwech, for sharing your stories and yourselves with us this evening. Tai, just really powerful words that you have shared this evening. And I, at one point, I was just like, I'm memorizing what you had to say. So good. So before we wrap things up, however, I want to share some information about the next two webinars and remind you that we've got a raffle. So without further ado, the next two webinars we have coming up on the 25th, Indigenous Innovation, Energy and Climate and Education. That's Wednesday, September 25th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And then the other one will be Sharing the Power of Vision Across Generations, and that's Thursday, September 26th, also from 6 to 7:30 p.m. So, and if you're in the Puget Sound area, and AKA the Salish Sea, please come be with us in person to culminate this Blue Jay Week of Awesome with our 20th anniversary celebration, which is on Saturday, September 28th. Sliding scale tickets are available, and it'll be an amazing gathering, and I'll be there hugging everyone. And so, yeah, our 20th anniversary, I can hardly believe it, but we're going to have some traditional foods and some buffalo stew, and we'll be honoring some of our past board members, and we'll also have a door prize coming in, and our keynote speaker is Mariana Harvey, who's Yakima. She's been hanging out with NIF for a long time. So before we close the session, one last item, the raffle. I love to give stuff away, and I'm very excited about this. So Chris Burnell, our tech guy, is going to share our wheel of awesome. and spin it. We're gonna pull 3 names. First spin. Drum roll. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Looks like a record. And I cannot see that. Corrine Ludi. Yay! Everybody give a good Muppet. Yay for Corrine. Congratulations. We'll be in touch with you via email on your awesome prize from 8th Generation, Native Owned Business. And winner number 2. Rhoda Couture. Rhoda, congratulations. You are a winner. We will contact you via email. Yay! Third and last, we have Deborah Burton. Yay, Deborah, you are a winner. So more to come this week. Congratulations to our raffle winners. And also thank you so much for our panelists. I am so happy and privileged to be a part of this. Just joy and hardship and great wisdom and sharing tonight. Thank you, everybody, for making time to be in this space with us. And we hope that the rest of your evening and the rest of your week is super amazing. So, bye, everyone.